Morning and welcome to Avero's live stream this week. We are an independent ERP and management and IT consulting firm that works with local governments across the country. And we go live every week on Wednesdays. And this content can be found on our YouTube channel, podcasts, and various other media. So just go check out on our website and see what we have to offer. Today's guest is the esteemed Brian Turbitt. He is the finance director at the Town of Nantucket, Massachusetts. And we met a couple of years ago at the GFOA convention in Portland. And he's one of the most fascinating people to talk to, very deeply ingrained in the public finance profession. And it's just a thrill to have you on, Brian. Welcome.
Thanks, AB, for inviting me to join the discussion. It's a very interesting topic I think, especially with what municipalities are facing today.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So before we get into it, I think the audience and audience, let us know in the chat box where you're calling in from or checking this out from. And we're also taking questions as we go through this live cast. Brian, where did you get started? How did you end up in municipal finance? I don't think anyone, and this is not to be insulting, right? I'm an accountant too. I don't think anyone, when they're 5 or 10 years old, decides to be a CFO for a town or a city. I haven't met that person.
AB, I definitely would agree. I probably did not, when I was trying to determine what I wanted to do, say I want to be a municipal finance director. But my father did work for the state of Vermont when I was growing up, so I did see the benefits for working for a municipality or a state entity. So I moved to Massachusetts in 2003 from Vermont, where I had been a business manager for school districts. So I did end up in municipal government through kind of a roundabout path from the private sector accounting. When I moved here, I went into startups, and then I was living in Millbury, and when I moved down here and became friends with somebody who ultimately became the town manager in Millbury, who dragged me back into municipal government, working for the town of Millbury. And then the opportunity here in 2014 came up, and I decided to take the leap and become the director of municipal finance on an island 30 miles out in the middle of the ocean, which certainly does pose other challenges, not just municipal finance and or ERP systems related.
I bet, but it's Nantucket. I'm sure it's a lot of fun too. But besides the point here, so school systems finance director to municipal. It's so traditionally, right? And I'm not saying this is 100% the case everywhere. There's tension between these two entities, right? School systems and municipalities that have school systems as a budget line item, but they don't quite see it that way. So now that you're on the other side, what do you think of all that?
So it's interesting. So when I was in Vermont, I was actually in a small community. It was a 3-town community when I was there: Wallingford, Shrewsbury, and this town called Clarendon, just outside of Rutland. And the school districts there were completely separate from the towns and the municipalities. Mm-hmm. So they had separate budget votes. Everything was much more diversified and separated than it is here. Especially in Nantucket, the school budget is part of the operating budget. They operate under very specific, separately enabling statutes other than the municipalities. So there's certainly here, it's certainly a little bit, it's more collegial here than in where I was in my previous town. But there's certainly a little bit of pushback between the two, just because you both operate under different structures and different enabling statutes. So it certainly makes it an interesting dynamic. But like I said, here we have a very good relationship with the school and the school system. So I think it's been a positive experience in that dynamic. And we're all on one platform of an ERP system. So I think that certainly does help in some ways as well.
Well, and also I'm sure it helps that you've been on both sides of the house. You know, when it comes to
it does. It gives me a little bit of an understanding. Although certainly, I think one of the biggest transitions when you're moving from one state to another is, Massachusetts municipal government accounting is certainly, and school accounting is certainly different than what I was familiar with in Vermont. One of the biggest difference really between Massachusetts and most every other state is we convert our books on June 30th into GAAP accounting according to GAAP and GASB. We make year-end reconciling entries. We operate under a completely different accounting structure that's statutorily laid out in Massachusetts. So it makes it a little bit interesting in doing that.
So a couple questions already came in. Well, Jake's calling in from or joining us from Greenville, South Carolina. Hi, Jake. Jake's one of our PMs. And Kyler asks you, where in Vermont, Brian Turbitt? My first job was at Sugarbush Resort.
So that's a great question, Kyler. Thank you. I actually grew up in Barrie, which was right outside the capital. So Sugarbush was pretty much right around the corner from where I was growing up, and then ultimately in the school sector, I worked in just outside of Rutland in a small school district that comprised the communities of Shrewsbury, Wallingford, and Clarendon.
I have no idea where those places are, but thank you, Brian.
They're actually right near another ski resort, Killington Ski Resort, and was right around the corner from where I ultimately ended up working in Rutland, and then moving from there to Massachusetts.
So, you mentioned having common ERP system with the school, and that's sort of the topic of conversation here. When you started in municipal finance, what was your first job? Were you you didn't get a first job as a finance director, did you?
My first job at the school and working in finance, well, actually, it was not my first job. I did have some experience in government because I did work for the state of Vermont,
Right.
as doing unemployment analysis and rate setting for the unemployment division.
Mhm.
But my first job in a school setting was as the business manager, and I took that leap from being in working for a private accounting firm that their majority of their practice was focused on municipal and school district audits. So I ended up jumping from that accounting firm actually to one of their clients. The school district that I went to was a client. And so I did my first leap into school districts was as a business manager. I dove headfirst in because I just wanted to take the challenge on.
Well, yeah, and that's not just finance, right? You're actually just you're managing the shop there, the ins and outs of everything for a school district. So what system did they use, ERP wise?
So they in Vermont when I started, the
Yeah.
primary system was one that was developed by a firm in Williston specifically for school districts in Vermont. So it was really kind of siloed into really not compatible, or not many other school districts outside of Vermont would use it because their prime focus was on all the school districts in Vermont. And the name does elude me at this time because it was a very, very long time ago. But their primary focus was Vermont, so they didn't have a big presence outside of there. Maybe some small schools systems on the border between Vermont and New Hampshire, but other than that, they were very very focused on the state of Vermont.
So, in your opinion, Brian, do you think is there such a thing as a specialized financial management system for schools? I know, every school system in every state we go to will say, well, we're very unique, we're very specialized, and you said those things to me too, right? So, in terms of a school system versus a municipal financial system, what's the difference, and how specialized does it need to be? And I'm not talking about student information systems or any of that, just financial management.
Here in my present role, I don't think that there's a vast difference in the specialization that's necessary to operate the two systems. The Department of Education here does require a different chart of account string than we're using, which is one of the reasons that we are kind of starting down the path of reviewing the entirety of our ERP system. But from day-to-day accounting, most of it is the same and can be, in my opinion, can be completed with with the ERP system we have. Like I said, there are some differences in the account structure that we still have to work out because as a point of reference, the current ERP provider that we are using, we've been with them for close to 25 years. So when we set this up, it was set up, 25 years ago with some
Hmm.
minor changes along the way, but certainly, um, given that the Department of Education works a little bit different, they've made some changes for reporting that they would like, which we're now being, um, for lack of a better term, kind of forced into having to consider making, to comply with that, but also keep it out of our management letters. So
Yeah. Well, that
on
is,
a day-to-day functionality basis, debits are debits and credits are credits, regardless of what side of the books you're on there. So that doesn't change a lot. It's just reporting wise, they would like some other account structures that we currently don't have.
yeah. So I think you just answered Kyler's question. What are some unique financial needs that municipalities require for technology? Yeah. Well, let's dig into that a little more. Uh, what's unique about municipalities that an ERP system or financial system needs to do? Reporting is what you said. Is that the same on
To be
the?
honest with you, V, I don't know that I look at a municipality still as a business. We may not be producing,
Yeah.
what I would call a tangible good that you can go buy at a store or something, but we're still providing services, right? So
Okay.
in my mind, what we need still to some degree still mirrors what private sector businesses are looking for in terms of reporting, in terms of functionality, because we do payroll and many of the other types of activities they do. One of the most obvious differences, we collect property taxes and we create we do assessed valuations, so we maintain valuations on properties. So there are certainly some differences that create the need for some more of a diverse platform to be able to maintain some of the functions that we do engage in. But a lot of my thinking has always been that a lot of reporting and a lot of the normal everyday functionality that we need is similar in a lot of ways to what private sector businesses are doing and are looking for, from budgeting to reporting to report production creation and things like that. It's all very similar in my mind.
It is, and I agree with you. And sometimes clients, prospects will ask us to do an ROI. Tell us what an ROI is on implementing a new ERP system. When there's a lack of a profit motive, or really you're not selling widgets to make income, it's really
Right.
hard to come up with an ROI. And in that case, it's just you can do it, but you have to agree on the assumptions, and you can come up with a percentage that makes you feel better.
I think you're correct, but I also think when we're looking at if using the example of transitioning to a different ERP system, what's the ROI on it? I think a lot of times for me, when we're looking at that, it's not necessarily a purely financial calculation. It becomes an efficiency calculation,
Right.
in able to deliver the services more efficiently to the residents and the taxpayers, and also it becomes more of a transparency issue about how we can deliver that data that the taxpayers would like to see. So I think when we're trying to do that, I think there's a couple other um, areas that we have to focus on, because it's not purely a financial decision.
Correct.
It's an efficiency decision because of the type of services that we're providing.
Yeah. Um, More questions.
This is great, isn't it?
I know, like, yeah, this is great engagement for this session. I don't know what it is. Must be you. What's your expectation for a new ERP system, or how do you measure financial ROI? I think he answered the second piece. But expectation wise, and I know you haven't made a decision. You're still reviewing all of this. Um, but you've been in the business for a long time. You've seen the evolution of financial systems. You're also very plugged into the ecosystem. GF. You go to conferences, and you're very curious about what's new on the market and what could be useful to your organization or you personally. Tell us what you're seeing out there that um, a could be useful to you today, and I think part B of that question would be, where do you see uh, enterprise software for financial professionals and municipalities going? Um,
Sure. And that's a great question. And this has been something that I've been thinking about for the last couple of years. Probably started um, at a very, 64,000 foot level before I met you and GFOA in Portland. And then we had a pretty lengthy discussion there, which really made me start thinking about this on a more micro level, and how what we were using and how we were using it and what opportunities existed. As I said, the town has been on the ERP system for pretty much 25 years. It's an end-to-end solution, encompasses everything we do, with the exception of the assessors database, which is there's two particular companies that are fully focused and scaled to do that in Massachusetts, and that's primarily their focus. So we do use one of those, but I think initially the brief conversations that I had with you kind of reshaped my focus a little bit on this. And I had been thinking about it for a while, and I'd always thought that one provider of every single module that we used was the way to go, because I was always wanted to be able to just go to one place to find everything. And in my previous employer, in my previous town that I was in, we had two different systems, one processing payroll and one processing all the other accounting functions and transactions. And I hated doing journal entries between the two because I always wanted to be able to see the data and, from payroll into the accounting system. And I had to go to two places to look at it. So I was always of this mindset that if I had everything in one place under one provider, it would be the best situation that I could be in. And I think as ERP systems have evolved and the functions in our job and finance directors have evolved in understanding the technology and moving forward, I've really come to the conclusion that I would like to have modules where the vendor is the best in class in that particular functionality that I'm trying to do, and that I don't necessarily have to have one provider provide every module, and that it will work and it'll be okay, and I'll still be able to do all the functions that I need, and to be able to get the data. Because I think what I've come to realize in visiting all the vendors at GFOA and talking to vendors and other conversations with you and other people engaged is that in this day and age, trying to have one vendor be perfect at every function in an ERP system, I think is it's just not possible anymore to devote the magnitude of resources, in my mind, that you need to have to be the best in any one portion of that. So I think I've evolved as the industry has evolved to realizing that we can pick a vendor for payroll and it may be the best in class in payroll, and there's another vendor that has a superior product in general ledger or tax collections, and it's all going to work. But I think it also comes down to engaging the right vendor to help you do the implementation, because in my mind, making a switch of that magnitude probably would be beneficial to the town, but you get one shot at the implementation. And if you don't do it right, then I'm in a worse position than I'm in today, right?
Yeah, I think it's a once in a career move if you do it right.
This will be my second one. So,
what were you involved in? Were you part of an implementation before?
Well, we did a small implementation and change when I was in the school district,
Okay.
to add a couple modules from the ERP system we were using there, and really where I kind of developed the mindset that if you don't get the implementation right, then you're garbage in, garbage out, right? And that's the most important piece of it. And a lot of it was because I think that experience and talking to people now and talking to some of my colleagues who are attempting to do this ERP conversion on their own has also led me to the belief that we need to find a vendor who's independent, who can help us and guide us through this, because it's a lot of work. And if you don't get it right, then it creates a lot of problems that may take years to end up resolving.
Yeah, and that, I think, ties into the question Megan's asking: how much involvement do you expect from the vendor during the ERP implementation? And I think the question is about the software vendor. How much do you expect? You expect them to do it all, don't you? Like just plug it in
I
and go away.
expect them to do. I look at the implementation really as a partnership,
Yeah.
right? Because then it's going to be hopefully a long-term partnership and solution. So I expect that there's going to be a substantial amount of involvement from the vendor. If we're utilizing their platform, I'm expecting that they're going to be there to help support me during the implementation, and whether that's boots on the ground in Nantucket or whether it's done remotely, I'm going to expect a heavy involvement, because they have the expertise in transitioning, right? We,
Yeah.
as finance professionals, we don't do this on a day-to-day basis. So my expectation is they're going to be heavily involved. But I also think to Megan's question, that there is another layer that we as professionals in this industry need to think about, and that is, you know, a firm or a consulting entity that does engage in this, that can be the go-between, that has experience in managing these as well. Because I think sometimes during these conversions, you know, the vendor is likely, if they're encountering a problem, it'll be fine, we can fix it. And I don't want to wait. I want problems resolved as they arise, not wait till the end and try to go back and remember what the problem is, what we need to fix, and do it. I want it fixed as we're going. And I think that as the finance professionals trying to do this, we also have to be, we're also doing a numerous other functions of our job. So we don't have all of the time to devote, which is one of the reasons why I expect the vendor to be heavily involved. But one of the reasons I also think, as we consider this route, that we would involve an outside independent third party to assist us in that implementation as well.
No, and good points, Brian, because, you know, the vendors, their interest, as it should be, is to give you the software, make it work, and go away. Sometimes, and this has been expressed to me by the vendor friends, right? They say, okay, when we get to a client, they're not ready for our product. They've bought it, and we find them making decisions they should have made last year on how this product should work for them. Because that is not the software vendor's job to help you work through how you want your, you know, internal processes set up, or who should be reporting to whom, and who should be approving X, Y, and Z processes. So that tends to add a lot of complexity and delays to projects. So I think you're looking at this in the right way.
But AB, and I think Megan made a good point that sometimes I think in our role in an implementation, it is more difficult for us to hold the vendor accountable, because we're going to have a long-term relationship for them and with them. And I think that Megan has a good point, that in which she noted that having that third party representing us also gives us somebody that can hold the vendor more accountable, because their relationship is terminating with us once that implementation is done. And
Right.
I think that certainly helps in a lot of respects too.
Right. All right. More questions. Man, this is blowing up. Hold on. Okay. Municipalities tend to operate on a fixed budget, unlike private businesses. Do you think they are most at risk for implementation failure? How do you maximize a turgid budget? Now, there's a little bit of a myth in here, isn't there?
There is a little bit of a myth. We certainly we have some flexibility. I think private sector businesses and an implementation of this scale and magnitude would certainly have more flexibility from the budget that they set. But municipalities do have flexibility to do this. We typically, in most of any project we do, we build in a contingency factor to cover unanticipated or unknown developments in it. But Kyler's right. We certainly, when we go to town meeting and we vote a budget, there's a cost presented to the town for doing this, that they expect that that's what's going to take. But there is some flexibility. We can't necessarily always move as fast as private sector can in making budget adjustments. But with a project of this scale and magnitude that we will eventually undertake, we would have flexibility to make budget adjustments as we were going through it. Some of them, depending on the scale of the budget adjustment, might take a little bit more time to do, but we do have some flexibility. It's just, it is inherently a little slower and a little more time consuming.
Well, I think it's also about communication, right? No one likes surprises, especially councils and boards.
Yes.
In municipalities, I think that's where the trick lies, where you don't plan ahead enough that you have not anticipated a change order. A change order is not a bad word or a bad term, right? It's a given in any kind of project, construction,
It
and
is.
software. But it's how you communicate, how you anticipate, and how well you prepare your audience for a change. If you don't, and if you surprise council with a 20% overrun, you're in trouble.
So I think that one of the things that would help mitigate that and kind of take some of the uncertainty out of the change and the issues that Kyler really kind of presented and questioned on is one of the other reasons why we believe that it's important to involve a third-party vendor in helping to look at the entirety of the system we're using, help us develop the appropriate RFP or an RFQ to do this, so that ultimate selection, we have thought about a lot of these. Because again, municipalities, this is generally a once in a career project, right? Municipalities don't do this every day and they don't do this on a regular basis. So I think that for a municipality undertaking this, trying to go at it alone is where you're not going to think through everything you do, or you're not going to be able to put that into something that the potential vendors will be able to quote properly on, which I think is where you run the risk of that happening.
Yeah, no,
Which
great
is one
point.
of the reasons why we've internally talked about engaging outside help to do this project as we look to move forward, so that we can be better prepared and hopefully avoid some of those uncertainties and unknowns that can lead to those change orders. Which change orders happen, but you certainly don't want them very quickly in the project, right?
No, and you don't want too many. I mean,
No.
it's not fun for anybody unless again you've done it right. Jake asks Brian, how do you approach? I like how he said Brian and not just general. He doesn't want me answering. Brian, how do you approach reevaluating your existing business processes in preparation for a new, likely more powerful ERP system?
That's a great question. And internally, we've started the evaluation by all of the staff that are day to day, what I would call power users, are really writing down the functions that they use, all of the steps that they're using to go through them, what they do and don't like about those processes. And we're starting from an understanding of what all of our staff are looking for in how they're utilizing our current ERP system, and what they think they would use could be better for them and create those efficiencies. And what we are going to do is we're going to take all of those discussions and we're going to put out a solicitation to hire an outside consulting firm to go through all of that, and then sit with us and go through how we do everything and look at the process that we're utilizing. Hopefully say, okay, there's other options for you out there potentially, or you should stay with your current provider and make the following changes. But we are really starting at the floor with our staff and heavily engaging them in the initial discussions, because they're all the day-to-day users, and the goal is to provide the efficiency and the utilization on a more efficient way for them. So we're starting there, and then we're going to move to a solicitation for an outside vendor to come in and take all of that data and look at how we're doing and use their experience and their expertise to help guide us, which may result in a request for proposals for vendors, and go from there.
I mean, if you had asked me, that would be the recommendations we would give you, right? So, well done. More questions. No one's letting me ask my questions, but let's see.
But he's excited about this today,
I
right?
know. I'm telling you. Do you see any challenges between state and local government responsibilities? I feel like the state of Massachusetts and the town of Nantucket are very different. I mean, I'll do my take on this. You kind of rely on the state. You're collecting taxes on behalf of the state. But what else? Like, is there any
So
challenges?
the interesting thing about for us is that all of the local taxes that we collect are all kept here for the most part, because the largest source of revenue for a community or municipality in the Commonwealth is really property taxes. It's the largest revenue source in every budget. I think that there's some similarities in terms of the functions we do. I think there's some dissimilarities on the scale that they do. There's not our interactions with the state are more on the school side with the Department of Education, and then any state funding we get or any grants that we get. So our interaction is there, but we do have some interesting process here. The state actually has to approve our tax rate annually. So we have what's known as a tax rate setting process through the Department of Revenue. There are some interesting, we do have to file what's known as a Schedule A, which compiles all of our expenses. I think probably most states across the country do some similar version of that. It helps reporting for the state and to the federal government. And then in my previous experience when I was back in Vermont, the independent auditors verified our fund balances and our retained earnings in the school for various funds. Here we do have an independent audit, but the state has to sign off on all of our calculations for unreserved and undesignated fund balance. And there's a lot of hoops that we go through to get those things certified. So I don't know that there's a lot of things that are not necessarily similar. I think that there are a couple things that we do that are a little bit different, but for the most part, I think our operations on a day-to-day functionality basis are pretty similar, but on a scale are just wildly different in terms of the scale and the magnitude of the services.
I think those are some good examples of how you are unique, right? With the state having to approve your tax rates.
Yeah.
Most places do it locally, and the reporting that's associated with that. I guess that's one of the major features or unique requirements that you'll have when you uh, implement a new system or re-implement your current
Yeah.
system that doesn't work for you. Um, and I guess that leads me to question from Megan: what are your plans for change management and user training, or do you have plans yet, or what have you thought about it?
Um, I don't know if I think we really haven't gotten to that point and that granularity quite yet. I think we're
Mhm.
really we've talked internally about the change, and I'm a big proponent of training. So whatever direction we go, there's going to be a heavy focus on training, because I think that training and through this process really lays the groundwork for success for the employees. And that ultimately, as I do this and we undertake this, that's my goal is to provide all of the staff, not only in my office, but all of the other departments that utilize this system, um, a system and a functionality that works in a way that makes sense and that they can feel comfortable with. So from the training perspective, Megan, I think that that'll be a heavy focus on this, because I think that that's been something that has been lacking in the last few years as we've gone through some change in employees. And I think this is one of the things that is also maybe has taken me down this road of starting to look is I think that when you have a long-term relationship with any vendor, doesn't matter who it is, things get to be comfortable, and there's fewer and fewer check-ins, so to speak, with your client reps, with the company as a whole, or with people that do the training. And I think it becomes kind of an afterthought unless we really push for it.
Yeah.
And I think so. Um, and I think that it really becomes, employees learn tricks to make things a little easier, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to do it. It's just kind of what they figured out. So in any of the change that we're envisioning, it's going to be a heavy focus on training of the employees with building individual user manuals for everybody to have, so that when we transition out, if an employee leaves, the person filling them can come in and they'll have a really good understanding or a basis to be able to move forward. But training will be a focus, and I think it has to be a focus when you do this.
Oh, absolutely. And in the implementations that we support, what we've seen is the vendor will have their generic sort of manuals and help guidance features, what have you. But sometimes it's a unique process that they don't have that specific one pager for, and we've created those for them. I'm gonna try and sneak in a question I have before people start asking you more questions, Brian.
You don't like all the other questions?
I do.
Which are great, by the way.
It's my live stream. Um, what you're in a unique position in one other way, right? You are the CFO, finance director for the city and county of Nantucket.
Yes, yes.
And
So
it's not one
Nantucket is
entity.
no, they are two separate entities.
Okay.
The county is enabled under separate legislation. We are the only town and county, single county in the Commonwealth. Every other county has multiple cities or towns in it. They use the same software that we do from an accounting perspective, so
Mhm.
they're on the same software. Up until recently, we had also the regional transportation system was on the same accounting platform as we have. There's regional transportation systems in every county. They've transitioned away because they're really kind of more of a component unit of the Department of Transportation than they were really affiliated with us. But the county of Nantucket, which the county itself has no employees. I'm the finance director, CFO, procurement officer for the county, and the town manager is also the town manager is the manager for the county as well. And the select board are also the county commissioners in our organizational structure. Within the county is also the registry of deeds, where all property transactions and all real property transactions are recorded, deeds, mortgages, everything. They do have 3 employees. So there's more than one component within our county. We also have a land bank, which is a component of the county, which is focused on conservation and derives its revenues from a transfer fee on real estate sales. But the entire organization, just irrespective of which side it is, county or town, are all on the same ERP system. So if we make a switch, it'll be county and town wide that switch will happen on.
Yeah. No, I I don't think I know any other. I know, so there's city and county of San Francisco, for example, right? There's one entity. You guys are a little different from that standpoint. All right, I'll open up the questions again. We discussed vendors' responsibilities. What do clients need to do to commit to a successful transformation?
I think that clients have to commit the resources and the time and the staff to it, and have to be engaged in it. Even though my expectation is that the vendor is going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and an outside party is going to be there to assist and keep them on track and keep us apprised of the progress. It's my expectation that not only myself, but my assistant finance director, the assistant town accountant, and the staff at a higher level are going to be there every step of the way and be involved extremely through the whole process. I don't envision a scenario where I would sit back and say, okay, the vendor and the consultant are going to take care of this. I mean, this is ultimately going to be the system that we're using. And the implementation, while it's reliant on vendors, it'll be reliant on potentially one vendor or multiple vendors. Also, it's going to be reliant on the dedication and the amount of effort that we're willing to put into it. And at the end of the day, it is our product and it'll be my responsibility. So from my perspective, as we do this project and we move forward, my expectation is I'm going to be involved and my staff will be involved every day, most of the day through this process, and be there to be responsive and make sure things are functioning and working as we roll it out. So I don't think you can have a successful implementation without dedication and devotion from the client in not only the staff resources, but the upper level management commitment too, because I think that will dictate whether this succeeds or fails.
No, that those are some great points, Brian, because it's either, most of the time it's completely hands off where clients expect you to make key critical decisions for you, or they are in the weeds, and then it's overwhelming because you all have day jobs, right? Especially in larger financial departments, you can't do both. So that approach and outlook is fantastic. All right, Lexi is asking a question again addressed to Brian. Which training being such a large focus for you? Have you been in a situation where little training has been evident in an ERP implementation, or any facet of your professional life, right?
Yeah, I think part of what drove this decision is the inability to get a lot of effective training as we move forward. This it doesn't, but I think every step of my career in the municipal side, be in the school district or the other town that I came from here to Nantucket, I think training is something that we don't always focus on, and I think it is an important and critical factor. And I think that is probably one of the biggest situations that's kind of pushed this. Or some other obvious situations in my mind that have made me start to look at this a little different. But the availability of training and the difficulty of scheduling it is certainly something that has done this. And I certainly experienced that in my previous transition. But I think that's also a component of the fact that when you have long-term relationships, they tend to become comfortable over time, and you don't focus on the things that probably would help continue to maintain the working relationship as well. And I think training is an important role all the way through when you have a long-term relationship. So I don't want to make it sound with that answer that it's only the vendor side. It certainly is on the client side too, and we certainly could probably do a better job of forcing and requesting training. But also, it is sometimes a little difficult with the jobs and where we are in terms of hiring employees and everything now. If we're doing more with less staff, so unfortunately sometimes training takes a little bit of a backseat until it becomes a crisis, and then you're trying to put that fire out. So I have experienced a lack of training in every stop along the way that I've gone through. I think it's more highlighted for me now because when I came to Nantucket about 10 years ago, I was blessed with very, very long-term staff. and they had done a lot with the system we're in, and they were very comfortable in it. And as that transition happens, you schedule training, and I think we do it in an approach that schedules a training to get an employee to understand how to do the functions, but not really understand everything that goes along with that functionality that they're working on. So, I think it's very important, training, and I have those. I think this situation has highlighted that importance as well.
Okay,
I
Jake.
do want to make one before
Go
we
ahead.
take Jake's question, Av. I do want to make one point. Um, I'm not entirely and completely dissatisfied with the ERP system we have. I think it is very important that as a professional with the responsibility to provide services to the residents and to all of the departments in the town and the town manager and the select board, that we take opportunities to make sure that what we're doing and how we're doing it in the systems that we're using are right for what we're trying to do, not only now, but 5 years and 5 years in the
Mhm.
future, maybe. So this situation is born out of a lot of thought and decision, making on my part. It isn't, I do the vendor I'm unhappy with. It's that I think that this is something we should be doing to make sure that what we're using is right for the way we're trying to accomplish our job and deliver those services.
No, and great point, right? It's like a annual checkup, or a 10-year review of your building structure. I
I
don't
don't
know.
want to do this every year, Av.
No, I said 10 years, didn't I?
Okay,
Maybe I
good.
said annual. No, I get your point. I think every CFO, every executive anywhere should be thinking along these lines, right? How do we make our business processes the most efficient, especially when you're facing labor shortages and, like you mentioned, a turnover of staff that's leaving the doors with historical knowledge and your basically knowledge bank. So with the advent of AI and all of these new things that you've probably seen and heard talked about at GFOA, where do you fit in is the real question. And how do we take
And
your
one of the other
organization?
big things that we're dealing with too now is remote work, right? Which
Yeah.
is changing how we're accessing
Yep.
information and the work product. And I think that all of these factors lead to a point in time which we've come to, that we want to look at the system and make sure we can deliver the services that we want in the manner that's most efficient and to the taxpayer and to everyone that's interested in the information.
That's awesome. All right, I'm gonna take Kyler's question because she's asking me. What are your key takeaways from chatting with Brian? What do you find most rewarding about your job and engaging with incredible CFOs and other executive leaders? So, key takeaways from talking with Brian, and the reason that we're talking on the live stream is we've had many of these discussions at conferences over the phone. It's just engaging. It's great to talk with someone that A gets it, and B can challenge your assumptions on the things that you do on a daily basis. So that's rewarding. Um, and then the most rewarding thing about my job and engaging with incredible CFOs is actually I think I've talked about this before. I am a finance and accounting nerd. Got a couple of master's degrees in those areas. Never worked in it, so I always was like, what could my life have been if I had pursued that path? So we speak the same language, and that's what's most rewarding. Um, What else? Kyler. How can an independent advisor bridge this gap between vendor responsibility and client commitment? Um, I think the biggest thing is keeping things on track. As good project managers, as good third party engagers, uh, we understand that the motivations for each party may not be the same, right? So our job is to make sure that all of the arrows are pointed in the right direction, that we are making sure that no one's losing sight of what the objective of the project is. Because again, you're a software vendor, your job is to implement, make sure it works, and go away. If you're a client, your job is to make sure that what the vendor sold you actually works for you and sign off on it. And over a year and a half, 2 year long implementation, things happen, things come up that you need to make sure you're keeping your eye on the ball. What do you think?
Av, if I could just add to
Yeah,
that
please.
too, because I think and that's a great question from Kyler too, because Originally, we had thought we might have the bandwidth and the understanding to go at this alone. Um, but I think it's a great question in so much as I think the other thing that an independent advisor really brings to the table as well, which is critically important, is in helping the decision making process. Ultimately,
Hmm.
the decision making process and selection is the town's, but an independent advisor has a lot better depth of understanding of what the products out there are and how they function, because they will hopefully will have been involved in some of these implementations, so they'll know some of the hurdles or pitfalls that other clients have faced with products. They have a more in-depth knowledge of the products on a day-to-day basis, having been involved in this for other clients with implementations. And I think that that is one of the critical areas where I think that a lot of the help will also be afforded the town, because they are more in tune with all of the vendors that are out there right now and which ones are, will really be able to help the town. And so I think that that's an important and critical component of this too, which is one of the other primary reasons why I think it's the right option for the town to look at.
Yeah, and Kyler's follow up question is, why should clients consider independent advisor that's focused on ERPs as opposed to audit and compliance firms? Great question, Kyler. I think those firms bring value also, but their primary business is audits and financial compliance, and I don't think they're very good at, because they're not focused on the ERP business, right? And independent advisors in ERP that have their ear to the ground and are in the thick of things with new technologies, new developments, new ways that vendors are trying to deliver services, is really important to bring to the table. Because yes, there's a place for audit consulting and there's a place for compliance consulting, but that can't lead your ERP transformation because it's a whole other business. At the end of the day, you'll have better compliance, better reporting, better audits, but you can't
And I
get
think
to
the
it.
other factor with that too, though, AV, is that
Yeah.
our firm really, the audit firm really needs to maintain independence. So we most likely would kind of, on a very high level, discuss what we were doing and what we may be moving to.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, we're producing the reports from the system and they're auditing the information. So I would probably, from my perspective, in doing this, I would keep them at an arm's length to it to make sure that we maintain the independence that we need
Yeah.
for in with the audit.
No, good point. I think Kyler meant to ask about our competition that is
Okay.
not just in the ERP space, right? They've been in
Right.
compliance and they've been in audits, and then they also do ERP consulting, because not all CFOs are as cognizant of the risk profile as you are.
But I also
Um,
think your audit firm is focused on one aspect of your operation, and
yeah.
they're not immersed in your property tax billing software or your your property valuation software or your even your payroll software. So they're more focused on maybe one component of the entirety of the system that you're using, which
Yeah.
I think is another reason why um, I don't think you would see a lot of them really trying to jump into this realm, or
Hmm.
why I wouldn't actually consider using my audit firm to help with this.
All right. There are no more questions. There's a lot of engagement. If you want to engage with the comments, go on our LinkedIn. Um, but I want to wrap this up, Brian, by one, thanking you for joining us today. You are always a great conversation, and I hope to do this again with you soon. Uh, any parting thoughts, words of wisdom?
Um, with regard to this, if you're
Well,
undertaking it, I would say take it slow. I know that we want to get to the end as fast as possible, but I think that this type of project is one that needs to be taken in slow, measured steps with the understanding of what your end goal is. Like I said earlier in the discussion, which is one of the reasons we're really involving all of the day-to-day frontline staff in the initial internal review and understanding, because I think that that's extremely critical, because it'll get the buy-in you need to make this successful.
thanks, Brian. Well, questions keep pouring in. If you have a couple minutes, Brian, what's your
I
favorite
have,
thing to
yes.
do in the town of Nantucket?
Well, the town is has 80 miles of beaches, So it's always fun to be able to go to the beach or go out on a boat and just spend time in the harbor. The town has it's got a lot of historical sites to it. We have numerous cobblestone streets, which are actually photographed on a day basis by all the visitors here. Downtown is very historic. We have a lot of history here. Was the whaling capital of the world at one point. In the evolution, it has transitioned from that to more of a destination and tourist economy over the years. Great restaurants. I think Nantucket is just a fun place. So there's a lot to do, and just love to explore it every day.
Just no more whaling.
Uh, Whaling.
All right. On that note, we'll wrap up. But I wanna announce that we are going to have a GovTech Insights workshop on August 28th. The link is on your screen. It's on our LinkedIn, where we're going to bring together a lot of our thought leaders internally from Avero to talk about four critical things. Modernization and technology is one. How to do better RFPs, and a couple other very important topics. So go ahead and sign up for that. It's going to be really exciting. Brian, I welcome you to join.
I probably will.
And ask pointed questions of our panel, and we look forward to seeing you there. But again, we're live every Wednesday. This episode will become a podcast and will be distributed in various different channels. So thank you for all your questions. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week. Thanks.